Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Note Investing series. Today we're going to discuss due diligence. We're looking at the things you need to do that I recommend doing when you're running your due diligence on notes. There's a lot of stuff to do. It's super important that you run due diligence before you make any investment, not just notes. Whether it's real estate, stock market, mortgage notes, anything you do, you should probably be running some due diligence. So let's get started. The first thing you want to do is you want to have an idea of value. I think value is one of the most important things because at the end of the day, your investment is being backed by an asset that should have adequate value. You don't want to buy, a note that's worth, the note may be $100,000 in principal balance, but the house is only worth $75,000. And if you go just off of the principal balance when you're buying your note, it could come back to hurt you. So what I like to do when I first start looking at a note is get an armchair value. What is an armchair value? It means I'm going online. I'm going to go look at the values provided by Zillow, maybe Redfin, Trulia, NARRPR, and if you're like a real estate agent, you have access to that site. There's several other ones out there. We use PropStream as well. And I want to go ahead and get an idea of look, what do I think the actual value of the house is? Now, when looking at value, you don't want to just take what their value is and say, Zillow will provide you with a value as estimate. We'll use them for an example. Well, what I like to go do is I'll look at their value as estimate, but then I go in and I actually put the actual address into the search bar inside Zillow. So it brings me right down into the neighborhood. And I start going through what's actually for sale in the neighborhood, and then I look at the actual solds in the neighborhood and go 12 or 6 months back, depending on how far back you're comfortable going, to then start looking at each of the assets that they're using as comps. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to, on the sold side, I want to say, are they actually, were these actual real person-to-person sales? Were they arm's length transactions? If you see something that's listed on Zillow and it's sold by a real estate agent, you can feel somewhat comfortable. Look to see if that same asset that was sold for maybe $150,000, see if it was sold anytime within a distance of maybe 12 months, 12 months prior at $100,000 or $75,000, and kind of get an idea there on the comps of look, what's the spread here? Is somebody buying this as a fix and flip and then they turn around and they sold it? Because what that'll do is it'll kind of bookend your market value. You see an asset on Zillow that was sold for $75 and then resold at $150, and you look at the pictures for both of them and it's when it sold for $75, it was beat up, needed a complete remodel. When it was sold at $150, it looked like a brand new house. Well, you've got your brackets, you've got your bookend, you've got a top of the market, and you've got a bottom of the market or a wholesale price that an investor is going to pay. This is really important to do, is to know your value spread, I call it. What's my as-is value and what's my after-repair value? And oftentimes you'll get a more accurate picture of that by looking at stuff, if you're fortunate enough to find them, that was purchased, there's a record of it, and then resold. So I definitely would do that. But then, like I said, I also look at what's currently for sale because that's dictating the market now. Solds are great, but looking what's your competition right now for if I'm going to be selling an asset is also, I feel, equally important. Because you want to know what's going on right now in that market. If I were to take this back today, what's the market demand? Look at the trend of values. Those are all important things. So you want to have an idea of value. That's first and foremost. Next, when it comes to start running your due diligence, you want to look at your digital documents. You're going to have the seller upload to the platform all the digital documents, the collateral file, note, mortgage, the chain of assignments, the chain of allonges, and then ideally you would like to have the origination file, which is these are all the documents that were filled out at the beginning when the borrower applied for the loan, the 1003 loan app, potentially the credit report, anything that you could use if you ever had to fight this in court. And you just want to really make sure that it's there, and go look at, when you're diving into the loan app, to look to see if it was a loan where potentially they shouldn't have got the loan. If you start running into issues where on paper the borrower was showing that they could afford a $750 mortgage payment. But this one is, $950 and it puts their debt to income ratio out of whack, then this is something that would be a red flag for me, something that I would look at. If you don't have the origination docs, it's not uncommon right now. It'll be tough for you to turn around if you're going to do securitizations with these and sell them. It's going to be tough. You're not going to be able to do that. But if you're going to turn around, hold it for a couple years, and then resell it on the market to another investor, something that's you could get away with and not be an issue. And I've sold them to even some institutions without the origination docs. So not end of the world. Stuff I like to have is the origination docs. But like I said, you can get away with not having them, especially if these loans have been, originated 10 years ago, purchased and sold 2 or 3 times. A lot of times the origination docs, they just don't make it back into the collateral file. So let's talk a little bit about the collateral file. Obviously, your crown jewel that you want to make sure is there, the biggest first check mark is the note. Is the original note present? That's a question you want to have. If you're seeing a scanned copy of the note, my question without fail is, do you have a copy of the original note? Without that, you're in trouble. Not in trouble, but it makes it to where it's like, look, if you don't have the original note, then that means I need to at least have a copy of it, and I need to see a lost note affidavit. And there's some states out there, do your research, where if you don't have the original note, you can't move forward with buying the asset, or you can't move forward with foreclosure. I want to say Connecticut's one. Maybe it was Maine. There's one, no, it was Maine. One state where if you don't have the original note, it becomes very difficult to foreclose on the asset. So I want to make sure that you have the original note, and then I want to go and I want to start at the beginning with who originated the note and the mortgage, and I want to be able to track every transfer to make sure there's a corresponding assignment and a corresponding allonge to go with the transfer. If you don't have it, there's a gap in the assignment. If that gap happens to be at the end, you want to talk to the seller and say, hey, I'm missing, who am I buying this asset from? What's the entity? So you can see the assignment going into their entity. If they're brokering it, you may have to have discussions with them, working on them, but you really want to see a full, complete chain of assignments. Review that collateral file, make sure it's there. Review the title policy, the lender's policy. Make sure there is an actual lender's policy in place and that it will assign to you when you buy the loan. So those are the high-level things on the collateral file that I always look for to make sure they're there. Original note 1, and then making sure the chain of assignments is intact. Once I have that, I'm going to probably do some exploring on the tax side, and I want to review to make sure all taxes have been paid. And I'm probably going to have somebody pick up the phone and call to make sure, to see who paid the taxes, to make sure they could show as current, and the taxes have been sold at a tax lien, and the current tax lien holder is just paying those to not set off any red flags, so they can wait their 2 years and then go back in and try to take the property back. So taxes are another important thing. Title taxes and blighted property are the 3 things that'll kill you in this business. Blighted property is stuff that's all boarded up. Maybe there's a tree falling through it, stuff that's been damaged. You want to do that, make sure of that. So once I've looked at the value, I've looked at the collateral file, following that up with a broker price opinion, which is a BPO, they're going to go verify my value and lay eyes on it. So that way I've got eyes on the property, I've got pictures of the property, live, a couple days old. I'm going to order a title report, an O&E report, ownership and encumbrance report, and they're going to go through, search title, make sure that everything I looked at, they can see, and see if there's any sort of red flags that pop up when they do their full-on title search. Now, with title searches, you can go with, 1 owner, 2 owner, a foreclosure search. It's just how much, obviously, the more in depth you go, the more it's going to cost, the longer it's going to take. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. But I am always going through, and I pull the municipal lien search and I pull a tax search because I want to know what's going on. What am I buying? Am I buying a headache with this property? Am I not buying a headache? It also depends on, what's my exit strategy. Am I looking to keep it and hold it? Am I looking to sell it or foreclose on it? If I'm looking to foreclose on it, well, a lot of that stuff I'm going to wipe out in the foreclosure. I look for those items. I look for the stuff that's not going to be wiped out, like the liens. Some of that stuff is going to remain, and you're going to be on the hook and have to pay those. So that's it. Due diligence. Those are the things you're looking for. Obviously, then we're going to go into this in a little bit, but I want to look at payment history. I want to look at servicing notes, and I want to look at some certain things on the within the note and the mortgage within the document. But that's for another video for coming up in the series. So high level, that's what we're doing due diligence. Value, collateral file, order the reports that are going to back all of those things up. And we'll catch you on the next video.